Hi, welcome back to my channel, Magic VR. This video is exclusive for the Patreons. The Patreons who are in the Prophets of the Beyond, who pays $10 a month. This video is exclusive for you. I'm gonna be talking about loadouts, how to pick our loadouts when we duel against somebody, and small tricks and psychology tricks that we can use in order to defeat our opponent just by picking the right loadout. Loadout number 1, loadout number 2, or loadout number 3. So let's start with this, okay? What I suggest the most, now I'm going to start with this, is first have a defensive loadout, letter D. Second loadout, have a neutral loadout, which means it's quite defensive, but you can also attack your opponent with it. And lastly, have a loadout that is very powerful, where you can attack a lot with it. It's not much of a defensive loadout. You will defend yourself by teleporting away or dodging, but most of your spells are offensive, attacking spells. So easy way to remember, DNA, defensive, neutral, attacking. Okay, let's just start with this. This is the first advice I'm giving you. Don't go with all defensive loadouts. You could go with all neutral loadouts if you can build those, but my personal opinion, from my experience, you want something like this, okay? So what I suggest you to do, and when you start playing somebody and you don't know much about their loadouts, you have no idea what kind of spells they're using, do it in order like this. Start with your loadout number 1, the defensive loadout. Why you need to start with your defensive loadout is because first you don't know what spells he's using, so you want to have a good defense. Because for those of you who've been following my channel and even on Discord, I always say defense is the best way to win somehow. If you don't get touched by your enemy the whole match and he gets only 1 of damage, you win. So being able not to get hit, defensive loadout, very powerful. So you use that first. And because you're going to be using defensive loadout first, most likely you might win the match. Because your opponent might go with a strong attacking loadout, and then he's going to be surprised by you just dodging everything, teleporting away, and putting your defensive traps everywhere. This way, you get to find out, okay, what is one of the loadout. Next thing to do, okay, because now you're gonna find out one of their loadout, and now it becomes memory. You need to remember what kind of loadout they've been using. Because on the second match, what I suggest you to do is to use loadout number 1 again. Why? Because the person just lost their match. And they just lost their match and they're like, man, this loadout didn't work. I'm gonna try my second loadout. And then boom, they're gonna try another loadout. But you keep those 2 secrets. You always have an advantage on your opponent if he doesn't know what you're gonna use next. Okay? If he doesn't know what your loadouts are, you're having a step ahead. So use your defensive loadout a second time. And let's hope that he's gonna use a new loadout. If he does, that's good, because now you know 2 of his loadouts and you only used 1. Now you do whatever you want. But the goal of all of this is simple. Try to always keep one of the loadout secret. Don't pull out this loadout until you've seen all 3 of his loadouts. You want to be the last one revealing one of your loadout. Because let's say, okay, that in loadout number 3, you have Chaos Leap, okay? So let's just imagine that you have Chaos Leap, which is this symbol right here. So you're waiting to use this in your loadout number 3, because you don't know if your opponent has spikes in one of their 3 loadouts. if he does have spike in one of these 3 loadouts, you might never want to use this loadout just in case that when you're fighting him with this loadout, he's using his loadout with spikes. Understand? So you don't have to use all 3 of your loadouts if the situation is not proper. So the way you play out your loadout, always make sure that one of your loadout is not revealed to your opponent, at least, okay, until you've seen all of his loadout and you can remember them. And you would be like, okay, so if I'm using this loadout in that map, with all of the loadout that he's using right now, if I'm using this loadout, I'm not endangering myself. You get it? It's kind of tricky, but it's very important to understand. Now, another thing that is special, sometimes you will lose your first match, and sometimes I lose my first match against somebody. And my first reaction is actually to change loadout. But I will do this if, of course, let's say that in the one I used at first, it was not that much defensive, and I did some major mistakes, and the loadout he was using was definitely not appropriate for the one I was using, and that I cannot figure a way, okay, because remember, when the match is over, you can take your time a little bit to look at the board, and then to press rematch, and to play restart again. But during this time, what do? Do you drink water? Do you pick your nose? Or do you actually think of a way that you could have used the same loadout against his same loadout, but in a different way, and think, if I do this, this, and this instead, he's not going to be able to do what he did all match, which caused me to lose. So always try, during this 30 seconds that you have, to figure out a way to beat him with the same loadout that you were using, thinking that he might use the same one too, because he just beat you. So most likely, he will use the same one as well. So use the same one and try to beat him with the same loadout. Of course, if, let's just say, which I really don't recommend you to do, let's say in your defensive loadout, you have the shield, and you do not have armor of the sun, you just have the shield, and your opponent has collars, curse, and disc. But you in your defensive loadout, you have the shield, chilling clutch, and blood bolt, and let's just say gas. There is not much you can do because he's gonna put the collars, he's gonna jump in it, protect himself from the gas, he's gonna dodge all of your blood bolt, all of your chilling clutch, and what he's gonna do? Put you inside the collars and throw the disc around you. Well, in that scenario, your loadout was crap. First of all, and actually if you're using the same loadout again, most likely you will not win unless you play a very, very good defensive game and never get trapped inside his collars. Or if you do, you're standing on a higher point and his disc cannot touch you. But it's still tricky because a good disc user will end up touching you if you're using the shield and if you're not moving. Alright? So let's say that happens. You have this really bad loadout as your first loadout. The opponent is putting you inside his collars, cursing you, and throwing disc around you. I mean, don't use this loadout again. It's okay in that situation to be like, okay, what the hell? If he's using this again and I'm using my loadout again, there is no way I can pull this off. Then just switch to your second or your third, depending on which one is going to be the most appropriate to defend against his collars, disc, and curse. And whenever which one you choose to pick, okay, then stick to it as long as possible as soon as you see more of his loadouts. And don't go back to this one, because you know that it's a bad one. He killed you already with it, and you can't figure a way to use this loadout and win against his loadout. So let's say in all of your loadouts, only one of them is good, then just use this one. You don't need to switch to 3 into 1. Because if you risk points just because you want to experiment, well, that's your season score right there going down the drain. If you know that there is no possibility for you to beat that at all with your loadout. I hope you understand something from this video. It's a little bit deep, a little bit complicated. There's a lot of guess and try. But by doing things like this, most likely you will have advantage on your opponent if you are really conscious and taking the right decision for which loadout you are going to use. Thank you for watching this video. I will be putting more like this. Have a great day, and thank you for being prophets of the beyond.